Far away, in a corner of the galaxy few dared to explore, the Deathworlders lived on a planet that was as unforgiving as it was beautiful. Their world was a harsh place, where violent storms could sweep across deserts in moments, and predators of unimaginable strength roamed the mountains and plains. Life here was not easy, and the people who called it home were not ordinary beings. From the moment they were born, they were trained to survive, to fight, and to endure situations that would have crushed most others. Every child grew up learning the lessons of resilience. They were taught how to hunt, how to read the subtle signs of danger in the environment, and how to rely on their own instincts. Nothing was given freely. Every achievement, every moment of comfort, was earned through effort and perseverance. Despite the brutal environment, the Deathworlders had thrived. They were not just survivors. They were experts at adaptation. Over generations, they had developed technologies and strategies that allowed them to turn the planet's natural dangers into advantages. Cities were built underground or in fortified strongholds to protect from storms and wild beasts, and every settlement had trained guardians who could respond to threats in seconds. Above all, the Deathworlders valued vigilance. Complacency was considered a fatal weakness. Even in times of apparent peace, they trained, observed, and prepared for the unknown. It was during one of these seemingly ordinary days that something unusual happened. Deep in the vastness of space, their advanced monitoring systems detected a faint but unmistakable signal. It was unlike any typical distress call. The signal pulsed in a rhythm that was strangely organic, almost like it was alive. It came from a remote star system, far beyond the Deathworlders' usual routes, in a region of space that few had explored and even fewer had returned from. The SOS was weak at first, barely strong enough to register on their instruments, but it carried a type of energy signature that was unmistakably alien. It was both intriguing and alarming. The moment the Council received confirmation of the signal, an urgent meeting was called in the grand halls of the Deathworlders' capital. Leaders from every sector gathered. These were not leaders who relied on emotion or instinct alone. Every decision they made was calculated, analyzed, and discussed in depth. They sat in circular chambers, their faces etched with a seriousness that came from centuries of governing a people trained to expect the worst. The Council debated the nature of the signal. Was it genuine? Or could it be a trap? Could some hostile force be luring the Deathworlders into danger under the guise of a plea for help? The risk was enormous. They were not a reckless people, and the idea of sending resources into the unknown without certainty was deeply troubling as the debate continued. Advisors presented every possible scenario. Some argued that the signal was a call for help from an alien species that had reached out across the void in desperation, seeking assistance from the only civilization capable of responding with speed and power. Others warned that the signal might be an elaborate trap designed to awaken a dormant fleet and force the Deathworlders into a battle on unfamiliar terms. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Even the slightest error in judgment could result in catastrophic loss, not just of ships or soldiers, but of the reputation and security of their entire civilization. Meanwhile, as the Council deliberated, the general population began to notice unusual activity. Ships that had been dormant for decades were quietly moved to hidden launch bays. Engineers and technicians who had long been retired were quietly summoned back to service. The rumor started to spread among the citizens. A fleet that had not seen action in generations was being prepared for deployment. The fleet had been legendary in its time, a force of unmatched power that had helped the Deathworlders secure their dominance across multiple star systems. It had been sealed away, hidden in secret bays, partly as a precaution and partly as a deterrent. No one wanted such power unleashed recklessly, but now, something was calling it back to life. The mood across the planet was a mix of awe, fear, and anticipation. Some people felt pride that their civilization was being called upon to aid others, even in a distant corner of the galaxy. Others felt unease, sensing the danger that always accompanied such power. The streets of the cities buzzed with quiet speculation. Children stared at the skies, imagining massive ships rising from their hidden bays, engines glowing as they cut through the planet's atmosphere. Scholars debated the possible origin of the SOS while soldiers reviewed old battle strategies, wondering what type of enemy they might face. Back in the council chamber, the final decision was made. Despite the risks, the SOS could not be ignored. The Deathworlders had a reputation to uphold. They were known as the galaxy's most disciplined and formidable warriors. Ignoring a call for help, whether genuine or not, would not only betray that reputation, it would betray the principles they had built their civilization on. The council authorized the awakening of the fleet. Orders were issued with precision. Every crew member, every engineer, and every strategist was given a role. The fleet, long dormant and untouched, would soon be brought to life, and with it, the power to change the course of the galaxy once again. As the preparations began, the planet itself seemed to respond. Factories roared to life, producing fuel and ammunition at a pace unseen in decades. Shipyards that had been silent for years echoed with the sound of machinery and labor. Every vessel was checked and double-checked, its systems brought online, and weapons calibrated with exacting precision. The awakening of the fleet was not just a technical feat, it was a cultural and psychological event. For the Deathworlders, it represented both their history and their future, a reminder of what they were capable of when united in purpose. In quiet moments between the chaos of preparation, older citizens spoke in hushed tones about past campaigns, of the fleet's legendary power and the battles it had won. Stories of courage, sacrifice, and tactical brilliance were passed down, reminding everyone of the responsibility that came with such power. Younger crew members listened intently, aware that they were stepping into roles that carried not just the hope of their civilization, but the weight of its legacy. The SOS had awakened more than a fleet. It had awakened memories, pride, and determination. As the days passed, the signal grew stronger, almost as if it were guiding them forward. Scientists and communication specialists worked tirelessly to decode its patterns, trying to understand the message in its entirety. Every discovery raised new questions. Who had sent this SOS? What threat were they facing? And most importantly, was it truly a plea for help, or was there a hidden agenda behind the desperate call? Each answer only deepened the sense of urgency. Finally, the moment arrived when the fleet was ready. Massive vessels, some hundreds of meters long, their hulls bristling with advanced weaponry, rose from their hidden bays. Engines ignited, filling the skies with a deep, humming resonance. It was a sound that stirred something primal in every Deathworlder who heard it, a mixture of awe and fear, excitement and respect. The planet watched in silence as the once dormant fleet came alive, its presence a testament to the civilization's unmatched ability to endure, adapt, and dominate. The Deathworlders had faced countless dangers before, both on their homeworld and across the stars, yet even they understood that this moment was different. The SOS was not just a signal, it was a challenge, a test of readiness, courage, and unity. Whatever lay ahead in the distant star system, the Deathworlders were prepared to answer. Their history, their training, and their determination had all led to this point, and as the fleet fully activated, ready to respond to the unknown, a sense of purpose settled over the planet. They were about to step into the void, to confront forces unseen, and to prove, once again, why the Deathworlders were feared and respected across the galaxy. Once the Council had made its decision, the Deathworlders moved with a precision and speed that only a society forged by constant struggle could achieve. Orders spread across the planet like wildfire, each command reaching every corner of their cities, factories, and training grounds. Every soldier, engineer, and strategist knew their role and the importance of their mission. Nothing was left to chance. Every procedure, every system check, and every strategy meeting was executed with the utmost care. This was not just a response to a distant SOS. It was the awakening of a force that had been lying dormant for decades, a fleet that had been built for dominance and perfected for war. As preparations continued, the people of the Deathworlders watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Massive shipyards, previously hidden under mountains and cloaked in technology designed to hide them from prying eyes, came to life. Cranes lifted enormous hulls, while engineers and mechanics moved with remarkable synchronization. Their movements precise and deliberate. Every component was tested and retested. Weapon systems that had not fired in decades were recalibrated with meticulous care. The fleet was not just being readied for travel, it was being restored to full operational capacity, to a level of power that few other civilizations could ever imagine. In parallel, the engineers worked to prepare the engine's massive fusion core, capable of propelling ships across light years of space in days instead of months. The energy output had to be perfect, or a single miscalculation could destroy a ship from within. Specialized crews monitored every system, checking for anomalies, recalculating power flows, and ensuring that the fleet could operate under the most extreme conditions. It was a monumental task, one that required the combined knowledge of engineers, scientists, and veterans who had once served on these ships. Many of these veterans had grown older, their hands no longer as steady as they once were, but their experience was invaluable. They guided the younger crew members, teaching them the techniques and secrets that had made the fleet legendary. Meanwhile, the soldiers trained relentlessly. For many, this was not the first time they had prepared for battle, but it was different from any previous conflict. This mission was unpredictable. They did not know who they would face or what threats awaited them. The SOS signal hinted at a desperate situation, but there was no way to know the enemy's strength, tactics, or intentions. The uncertainty was a test in itself, and the Deathworlders thrived on challenges. Drill exercises were conducted daily, simulating different scenarios that might occur once they reached the distant star system. Every soldier learned how to operate every weapon, coordinate with their team, and respond to situations that would have seemed impossible to outsiders. The civilians, though not directly involved, were deeply affected by the preparations. Streets were filled with people observing the fleet's awakening, whispering stories of past campaigns and battles won. Children stared wide-eyed at the massive ships, imagining the courage it would take to board them. Scholars debated the origin of the SOS and the possible alien species that had sent it, while historians reminded everyone of the lessons learned from previous conflicts. In every home, in every training center, the sense of anticipation was palpable. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the fleet to take flight. As the fleet reached readiness, the leaders of the Deathworlders convened once again to plan the journey ahead. Navigation charts were scrutinized for anomalies, potential hazards were identified, and contingency plans were formulated for every conceivable scenario. They had to move quickly to reach the SOS signal, but speed could not come at the cost of safety. Every trajectory was calculated to avoid detection by hostile forces, yet to arrive in time to make a difference. Communication protocols were established to maintain coordination across the entire fleet, which now consisted of hundreds of ships, each equipped with advanced sensors, weaponry, and defensive systems on board the largest of the ships. The flagship, commanders gathered to review intelligence reports. The SOS signal had been partially decoded, revealing not just a plea for help, but indications of a civilization under siege. The aliens who had sent the signal were technologically advanced, but their defenses were failing. The Deathworlders studied the limited information carefully. Every piece of data was analyzed to predict the enemy's movements, weaknesses, and possible strategies. The task was daunting. They were venturing into unknown territory, and the success of the mission depended on their ability to adapt to whatever they encountered. As the ships powered up their engines and began moving into formation, the atmosphere across the fleet shifted. The hum of the engines created a low, resonant vibration that could be felt throughout the massive vessels. Crew members took their positions, running final checks on weapons, shields, and communication systems. The scale of the fleet was awe-inspiring. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, bristling with advanced weaponry capable of annihilating entire enemy formations. Yet, for all its power, the fleet was designed for precision. Every move was calculated, every strike planned, and every contingency anticipated. This was a force not just of brute strength, but of strategy and intelligence. During the journey, the Deathworlders observed the signals from the SOS, tracking the distress and attempting to predict what kind of threat awaited them. The alien planet appeared chaotic from the scans. Cities were under attack, structures collapsing under the force of weapons the Deathworlders had never seen before. Smoke and energy signatures indicated widespread destruction. But the aliens themselves were still organized, fighting back with the courage and determination of a species that refused to surrender. The Deathworlders watched carefully, analyzing every movement, every attack pattern, and every defensive maneuver. The stakes were enormous, and mistakes could cost countless lives. As the fleet moved closer to the system, anticipation among the crews grew. Younger soldiers, seeing the alien world on their screens, felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Veterans, however, remained calm, focusing on their responsibilities. The Deathworlders were trained to face fear with discipline. Every decision was based on logic and experience, not emotion. They understood that panic could destroy even the most powerful fleet. As the distance to the SOS signal decreased, tension became almost tangible. The unknown threat loomed ahead, but the fleet moved with unwavering purpose, a testament to the training, strategy, and unity that defined the Deathworlders even as they approached the system. The nature of the threat remained unclear. Scans indicated multiple hostile forces, but the exact scale and capabilities were unknown. The Deathworlders began preparing for multiple scenarios. Boarding teams were ready to respond to emergencies or breaches. Specialized attack units stood by, capable of executing precise strikes against enemy targets. Defense systems were calibrated to respond to a variety of threats, from conventional weapons to advanced energy attacks. The fleet had been built for war, but its greatest strength lay in its adaptability and coordination. Amid the technical preparations, there were moments of reflection. Some crew members thought of their families, of the training that had brought them to this moment, and of the legacy they carried. The fleet was more than just ships and weapons. It was a symbol of the Deathworlder civilization, their power, and their responsibility. The SOS had awakened not only the fleet, but the spirit of a people who had been forged by hardship and honed by experience. They knew that failure was not an option, not only for themselves but for the species calling for help. Every decision, every maneuver, and every strike would have consequences that reached far beyond this single mission. Finally, as the fleet approached the outer edges of the alien system, the situation became undeniable. The SOS signal was urgent, desperate, and clear. The alien planet was in chaos, and the fleet would need to act quickly. Every crew member was prepared, every system operational, and every commander ready to make the critical decisions that could decide the outcome. The journey had tested their patience, their skill, and their determination. Now, the fleet was on the brink of action, ready to demonstrate the full extent of its power and the unmatched discipline of the Deathworlders. In that moment, the Deathworlders understood the true nature of their mission. This was not just a rescue operation. It was a test of their readiness, their capability, and their strategic brilliance. The fleet had been dormant for decades, but it was alive now, coordinated, and ready to face the unknown. The SOS had summoned them, and they would answer not recklessly, but with the precision and discipline that had made them legends. As the alien planet came into full view, the fleet moved into final formation, engines humming with controlled power, ready to unleash its full might on any who threatened those in need. The Deathworlders had embarked on a journey that would test their limits, to reveal their strengths, and define their legacy. The SOS had awakened more than a fleet, it had awakened the full potential of a civilization that had been built to endure, to survive, and to dominate. Every ship, every soldier, and every system was poised for action, and the galaxy beyond held its breath, unaware that a force unlike any other was approaching, prepared to intervene with precision, strategy, and overwhelming power. As the Deathworlders' fleet entered the outer regions of the star system, the tension among the crews was almost unbearable. The sensors aboard the ships were flooded with information, energy spikes, movement patterns, and readings of unknown origin. The aliens who had sent the SOS were still struggling, their signals indicating chaos, destruction, and fear. The Deathworlders observed carefully, analyzing every piece of data with the precision and attention to detail that had made their civilization legendary. They understood that this mission was unlike any battle they had faced before. They were not merely arriving to strike an enemy. They were arriving to stabilize a situation that could determine the survival of an entire species. On board the flagship, commanders gathered in the control room, studying the holographic displays that projected a three-dimensional map of the alien system. Each planet, moon, and asteroid was mapped with incredible accuracy, and each moving object, whether ship or projectile, was tracked in real time. The SOS signal grew stronger as they approached, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost alive. The Deathworlders recognized that every second mattered. Delay could mean the difference between life and death for the species they were coming to aid. The alien planet below was a scene of controlled chaos. Cities were burning, defensive energy shields flickered and failed under repeated attacks, and massive war machines moved through the streets, leaving destruction in their wake. The Deathworlders observed from orbit, carefully noting enemy positions, attack patterns, and vulnerabilities. From this vantage point, the fleet could see the bravery of the aliens. Despite the overwhelming force of their attackers, they were organized, coordinated, and determined to fight. Yet it was clear that they were losing ground. The Deathworlders analysts worked tirelessly, preparing reports and plans, suggesting strategies that could stabilize the situation with minimal casualties. The soldiers aboard the fleet were on high alert. This was not a simulation or training exercise. This was real, and lives depended on their actions. They ran through drills repeatedly, ensuring that every action was second nature. Communication between ships was constant, updates and adjustments relayed in seconds. The young recruits, some of whom had never been in a real combat situation, felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The veterans, however, exuded calm. Their experience taught them that panic was the enemy, and that every decision must be made with clarity and discipline. They mentored the younger crew members, guiding them through the process of preparing for engagement, making sure that every detail was accounted for. As the fleet moved deeper into the system, the SOS revealed more information about the alien civilization's predicament. The enemy attacking them was technologically sophisticated, using energy, weapons, and mobility that were unfamiliar even to the Deathworlders. Their tactics were precise, coordinated, and relentless. This was no simple raid or minor conflict. This was an organized assault aimed at total destruction. The Deathworlders realized that their intervention would need to be equally precise and decisive. They could not afford to strike recklessly. Every action had to be calculated, every move anticipated. Within the fleet, engineers and technicians worked around the clock to ensure that every system was functioning perfectly. Weapons were tested and retested, shields calibrated to withstand unknown energy types, and engines monitored for optimal performance. The fleet's advanced sensors were fine-tuned to detect even the slightest changes in the battlefield. Every crew member understood that they were not just observers. They were participants in a mission that could alter the course of this conflict. Preparation was everything. Failure was not an option. The first contact with the enemy forces was tentative. Drones sent from the alien world moved cautiously, testing the fleet's defenses. The Deathworlders responded with precision, using non-lethal force initially to gauge the enemy's capabilities. The drones, despite their technological sophistication, were unable to penetrate the fleet's defenses. This brief encounter provided valuable information. The commanders noted patterns, weaknesses, and potential strategies for the larger engagement that would inevitably follow. Each piece of data was analyzed meticulously, and the fleet adjusted its approach accordingly. Meanwhile, the alien population below watched the fleet in awe. Ships that had once only been legends in their stories now moved in formation above their cities, engines glowing and weapons ready. There was hope in their eyes, hope that help had arrived just in time. Some aliens had almost given up, preparing for the worst. But the presence of the Deathworlders' fleet renewed their courage. They began to coordinate with the fleet's signals, following instructions and positioning themselves strategically to minimize damage and maximize defensive potential. It was a delicate balance, one that required trust and precise timing. As the fleet drew closer to the planet, the scale of the battle became increasingly clear. The enemy forces were numerous and relentless, employing strategies designed to overwhelm and confuse. Massive energy beams cut through the cityscapes, and advanced aerial units swooped down with terrifying speed. The Deathworlders had to act carefully, Any mistake could result in catastrophic losses, not only for themselves but for the aliens they were attempting to save. The commanders developed a plan that combined overwhelming force with strategic precision. Every ship had a role, every weapon a target, and every maneuver a purpose. The fleet began its initial engagement with small, coordinated strikes designed to weaken the enemy without causing unnecessary destruction. Precision missiles and energy pulses disabled key enemy systems, allowing alien forces below to regroup and defend themselves more effectively. The Deathworlders observed every reaction, adjusting their tactics in real time. Their training, experience, and discipline allowed them to operate as a single, cohesive unit. Each decision was made with care, each action contributing to the overall objective of stabilizing the situation and saving lives. The alien defenders quickly adapted to the presence of the Death. They had never seen allies of such capability, and they struggled to keep up with the fleet's precision. Yet, they fought valiantly, coordinating with the fleet's guidance to strengthen their defenses and counter enemy movements. The combined efforts of the Deathworlders and the aliens began to shift the balance of power. Areas that had been under enemy control were gradually reclaimed, and vital infrastructure was protected from further damage. The hope that had been nearly extinguished began to grow once more. Throughout the engagement, the Deathworlders maintained strict discipline. Casualties were minimized wherever possible, and every maneuver was executed with exacting care. The fleet's communication systems allowed commanders to issue orders instantaneously, coordinating complex operations across hundreds of ships. Engineers monitored every weapon, every shield, and every engine, ensuring that the fleet could sustain prolonged engagement. Soldiers and pilots executed their roles flawlessly, relying on training, instinct, and teamwork. The SOS had summoned them to this conflict, and they responded not just with power, but with intelligence and precision. Despite their success, the situation remained dangerous. The enemy was persistent, adapting to the Deathworlders' strategies with increasing effectiveness. The commanders knew that a single misstep could undo all their progress. They prepared for escalation, ready to deploy heavier weapons and more aggressive tactics if necessary. Yet, even as they planned for escalation, they remained focused on minimizing harm to the aliens they had come to protect. Every decision balanced efficiency with responsibility, strength with restraint. The Deathworlders were a civilization built for war, but their greatest strength lay in their discipline and strategic thinking. As the battle continued, the SOS signal itself began to reveal additional layers of information. Hidden threats emerged, and previously unknown enemy units appeared on the scanners. The Deathworlders adapted quickly, implementing strategies that neutralized these new threats without compromising their overall objectives. The alien population below continued to fight alongside them, guided by the fleet's instructions and reassured by their presence. It was a dance of coordination, skill, and timing, with the fate of an entire world hanging in the balance in the midst of the chaos. Moments of heroism and courage shone brightly. Young soldiers, facing their first real combat, performed beyond expectations, executing complex maneuvers with precision. Veteran commanders made split-second decisions that turned the tide of localized battles. Engineers and technicians solved critical problems under pressure, ensuring that the fleet remained operational despite the intensity of the engagement. Every individual, regardless of role, contributed to the mission's success. The SOS had not only awakened the fleet, it had awakened the best qualities of the Deathworlders themselves. As the day wore on, the initial chaos began to subside. The enemy forces, while still formidable, were no longer unchallenged. The Deathworlders and the alien defenders had established control over key areas, and the momentum of the battle had shifted. The aliens, emboldened by the fleet's presence, began to fight with renewed vigor and coordination. The Deathworlders, observing the results of their actions, prepared for the next phase of engagement. They knew that the battle was far from over, but the first steps toward victory had been taken. Throughout this phase, the fleet maintained a balance between aggression and caution. They understood that every decision carried consequences, not only for themselves but for the species they had come to protect. Their training, experience, and discipline allowed them to operate effectively under pressure, adapting to evolving threats and maximizing their effectiveness. The SOS had brought them here, but it was their skill, precision, and determination that allowed them to turn a desperate situation into a manageable one. By the end of the first day of engagement, the Deathworlders had achieved something remarkable. They had stabilized key areas, protected vital infrastructure, and given hope to a population that had nearly lost everything. The SOS had been answered, but the mission was not complete. The enemy remained, and the challenges ahead were still immense. Yet, the presence of the fleet had changed the dynamics of the conflict, demonstrating the full extent of the Deathworlders' power, strategy, and discipline. As night fell over the alien world, the fleet hovered in orbit, engines idling but systems ready, soldiers and commanders analyzing every action, preparing for what was to come. The SOS had brought them here, and they had responded with unparalleled precision. The battle was far from over, but the first steps towards saving a civilization had been taken, and the Deathworlders proved once again, why they were among the most feared and respected forces in the galaxy. Asterisk. As the Deathworlders' fleet hovered in orbit above the alien planet, a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. The initial engagement had stabilized some regions, but the situation was far from resolved. The enemy forces were still active, still dangerous, and still determined to complete their mission of destruction. Yet now, the Deathworlders were no longer just observers, they were active participants in shaping the outcome. Every commander, soldier, and engineer on the fleet understood that what happened next could change the balance of power, not only in this system but potentially across multiple star systems. The SOS had drawn them here, but it was their decisions, their strategies, and their discipline that would determine the final result. The fleet's sensors detected new enemy movements that had gone unnoticed during the first phase of engagement. These forces were unlike anything the Deathworlders had encountered before, adaptive, intelligent, and highly mobile. It became clear that the attackers were not a single species or faction, but a coalition, working in unison to overwhelm the alien defenders. This realization required an immediate adjustment in strategy. The commanders convened on the flagship, analyzing data and debating the most effective approach. Time was critical. Every delay gave the enemy more opportunity to regroup, reorganize, and strike with devastating effect. After careful deliberation, the commanders decided to initiate a full-scale tactical intervention. This was the moment the fleet had been designed for. Weapons, systems, long dormant and now fully operational, were calibrated for maximum effectiveness. Energy beams, missiles, and defensive shields were synchronized with astonishing precision, capable of responding to multiple threats simultaneously. The crew members, many of whom had trained their entire lives for such a moment, took their positions with unwavering focus. Even the youngest recruits understood the gravity of the operation. They were not merely fighting a battle, they were executing a mission that required intellect, coordination, and flawless timing. The first strikes were deliberate and surgical. Targeted attacks disabled key enemy weapon systems without causing unnecessary destruction to the surrounding environment. Drones and smaller ships carried out reconnaissance missions, identifying remaining threats and relaying information back to the fleet. The Deathworlders' experience in prior conflicts allowed them to anticipate enemy reactions. Every strike was planned not only for its immediate effect but also for its ripple impact across the battlefield. The enemy, despite their sophistication, struggled to adapt. Their movements became predictable under the constant pressure of a force that combined raw power with intelligence. Below, the aliens watched in amazement. Ships they had only dreamed about in myths now moved with incredible precision, shielding them from the worst of the attacks and neutralizing the most dangerous threats. Communication channels were opened between the Deathworlders and the alien leaders, allowing coordination that transformed chaos into strategy. The aliens began to understand that their survival depended not only on the fleet's power but also on their ability to follow instructions and work in tandem with these extraordinary allies. Confidence and morale surged. Where fear had ruled, hope now took root. As the intervention continued, the Deathworlders uncovered a shocking revelation. Analysis of enemy movements revealed that this SOS had not been a simple plea for help. The aliens who had sent the signal had anticipated the arrival of a force capable of turning the tide of battle. And the SOS had been crafted not just for rescue but as a test. They had wanted to gauge the readiness and capability of the Deathworlders' fleet. It was a challenge to see whether this legendary force, long dormant, could still operate with the precision and power required to protect a civilization under siege. The realization was profound. The Deathworlders were not only saving a species, they were proving, once again, that their civilization's discipline, intelligence, and military might had not diminished over the generations. Despite this revelation, the Deathworlders remained focused on their immediate objective. The battle was far from over, and any lapse in concentration could be disastrous. Enemy forces adapted to their interventions, deploying new weapons and tactics in an attempt to regain control. Yet the Deathworlders responded with unmatched agility. Fleet movements were coordinated with near-perfect timing. Long-range strikes disabled enemy infrastructure, while smaller ships engaged in precision attacks to protect key areas. Every system on every ship operated at maximum efficiency, a testament to the meticulous preparation and training that had preceded this moment. The aliens themselves played a critical role in the unfolding events. Guided by the Deathworlders' instructions, they coordinated defensive efforts, evacuated civilians from the most dangerous areas, and even counterattacked in strategic locations. Their cooperation amplified the effectiveness of the fleet. What had once been a disorganized, desperate resistance now became a coordinated defense, bolstered by one of the most formidable military forces in the galaxy. The combined efforts of the Deathworlders and the alien forces created a synergy that neither side could have achieved alone. As the battle intensified, the Deathworlders demonstrated not only strength but also strategic brilliance. They anticipated enemy tactics before they were executed, intercepting attacks and neutralizing threats in real time. Energy shields adapted to enemy fire, deflecting or absorbing powerful blasts that would have destroyed lesser fleets. Weapon systems were deployed with surgical accuracy, taking out key targets while minimizing collateral damage. It was a display of military precision that inspired awe not only among the aliens but also within the ranks of the Deathworlders themselves. Every crew member understood their role, and every action contributed to the greater objective. The revelation about the SOS also affected the morale of the Death. Knowing that this was a test of their capabilities added a layer of intensity to their actions. They were not only saving a species but demonstrating that the lessons, experience, and discipline of their civilization had endured. The fleet moved with greater focus, each strike executed with precision, each maneuver calculated to optimize both efficiency and impact. This was more than a mission, it was a statement of legacy, proof that the Deathworlders could awaken from dormancy and operate with unmatched effectiveness. As the engagement continued, the scale of the fleet's capabilities became apparent. Massive energy cannons disabled enemy command structures, while smaller vessels executed flanking maneuvers that trapped enemy units in crossfires. Tactical drones provided real-time battlefield analysis, allowing commanders to adjust their strategies on the fly. Every decision was informed by data, experience, and the need to achieve maximum effectiveness with minimum unnecessary destruction. The Deathworlders' approach was deliberate, controlled, and terrifyingly efficient. The aliens, witnessing these actions, were both grateful and astonished. Their species had been pushed to the brink of annihilation, yet now, with the Deathworlders' intervention, they had a chance to survive. They began to trust the fleet completely, following instructions precisely, and engaging in coordinated counterattacks. Together, the Deathworlders and the alien forces created a level of tactical sophistication that the enemy had not anticipated. The battle, which had seemed hopeless at first, began to shift decisively in favor of the defenders. Yet even as victory seemed possible, the Deathworlders remained vigilant. They knew that overconfidence could be deadly. Enemy reinforcements and hidden threats could emerge at any moment. The fleet maintained strict discipline, monitoring every sector and preparing for contingencies. Engineers continued to optimize weapon systems, shields, and engines, while commanders recalculated strategies based on the latest battlefield data. Soldiers and pilots executed complex maneuvers with precision, ensuring that the fleet remained a cohesive, unstoppable force. The turning point came when the Deathworlders unveiled the full extent of their fleet's capabilities. Hidden weapons, previously thought to be ceremonial or defensive, were deployed in devastating strikes. Enemy units were caught off guard, their formations shattered by the precision and power of these unexpected attacks. The combination of strategy, technology, and experience overwhelmed the enemy, forcing them into retreat and disarray. The aliens below cheered as their cities were protected, their military forces stabilized, and their population given a renewed chance at survival. It became clear that the SOS had succeeded in more ways than one. It had called the Deathworlders to action, saving a civilization on the brink of destruction. But it had also proven the enduring power, discipline, and strategic brilliance of the Deathworlders fleet. Every crew member, every commander, and every system had played a role in a carefully orchestrated operation that combined precision, intelligence, and overwhelming force. The aliens had witnessed the full might of a civilization capable of awakening from dormancy and acting with unmatched efficiency and effectiveness on the quiet moments after the battle. As the fleet hovered above the alien planet, there was no celebration on the Deathworlders ships. They remained vigilant, engines humming and sensors active, preparing for the next phase of the mission. Yet within the hearts and minds of the crew, there was a profound sense of accomplishment. They had not only saved a species but demonstrated, once again, that the Deathworlders could respond to any challenge with precision, power, and intelligence. The SOS had awakened more than a fleet, it had awakened the full potential of a civilization that had long been legendary and would remain so for generations to come. After days of intense engagement, the alien world finally began to breathe a little easier. The enemy forces had been forced into retreat, their once imposing formations shattered by the precise and overwhelming power of the Deathworlders fleet. Cities that had been on the brink of destruction now stood mostly intact, thanks to the coordinated efforts of the fleet and the brave alien defenders. Smoke still rose from damaged buildings, and emergency teams hurried to attend to the wounded. But the sense of immediate doom had lifted. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the aliens dared to hope that they could survive, rebuild, and reclaim their world. Above them, the Deathworlders ships hovered silently, engines humming in a controlled rhythm, ready to respond to any lingering threats. The SOS that had called the fleet here had now been fulfilled, and the consequences of its message became fully clear. The aliens who had sent the call expressed gratitude beyond words, offering access to their technology, knowledge, and resources. Yet, the Deathworlders did not linger for praise or reward. Their mission had been defined by duty, discipline, and strategy, and they approached it with the same methodical precision they had applied to every step of the operation. There was no celebration, no grand acknowledgement, only quiet satisfaction in knowing that they had completed the task with unmatched efficiency. The fleet had demonstrated its power, its readiness, and its enduring ability to act decisively, and that alone was the measure of success for the Deathworlders. As the alien leaders began to coordinate the restoration of their cities, the Deathworlders commanders reflected on the operation. Every tactical choice, every maneuver, and every strike had been executed with careful calculation. The fleet had adapted to constantly evolving threats, employing strategies that combined overwhelming power with surgical precision. The training, experience, and discipline of the Deathworlders had been proven once again, and the SOS had not only saved a civilization but reaffirmed the reputation of a people known for their unparalleled efficiency and strength. Even among the crew, quiet conversations emphasized the realization that they had not just participated in a battle, they had helped shape the destiny of another species. During the aftermath, engineers and technicians moved systematically through the fleet, performing maintenance checks, repairing minor damage, and preparing systems for the return journey. Soldiers and pilots debriefed, reviewing every encounter and sharing insights on how the enemy had adapted and how their responses could have been improved. Even in these moments of reflection, the discipline of the Deathworlders remained evident. They analyzed, they learned, and they refined, knowing that the next mission, whenever it came, would demand even greater skill and coordination. The fleet was not only a weapon, it was a living testament to the civilization's ongoing evolution, a combination of strategy, technology, and human in this case, Deathworlder-ingenuity. As they prepared to depart, the aliens approached the fleet with offers of alliances, technology sharing, and long-term cooperation. While these gestures were sincere and heartfelt, the Deathworlders remained cautious. Their civilization valued independence, resilience, and the careful management of power. Friendships could be formed, but alliances had to be approached with the same discipline and foresight applied to their military strategies. Even as gratitude flowed from the aliens, the Deathworlders maintained a sense of measured detachment. Their focus was not on reward or recognition, it was on mission completion, the protection of life, and the demonstration of strategic excellence. The journey back to their homeworld was quieter but no less intense. Sensors continued to monitor the system for any lingering threats. The fleet moved as a cohesive unit, maintaining formation and preparing for any possible challenges. On board, the crew reflected on the operation, discussing the courage and coordination of both the Deathworlders and the alien defenders. There was a sense of pride, not just in the power they wielded, but in the discipline, focus, and intelligence that had allowed them to execute such a complex and high-stakes mission with minimal error. Every individual understood that the fleet's effectiveness was not a result of technology alone, but of the training, coordination, and discipline that defined their civilization during this period of return. The SOS's broader implications became clear. The aliens had designed the signal not only as a call for help but as a gauge of the Deathworlders' operational readiness. It was a test of their ability to respond to crisis, to manage overwhelming odds, and to project both power and restraint. By successfully completing this mission, the fleet had passed the test with distinction. The commanders and crew recognized the significance of this realization. Their civilization had not only saved a species but demonstrated that its legacy of strength, strategy, and discipline remained unbroken. They had proven, to themselves and to others, that the Deathworlders' capacity for decisive action was undiminished. Even after long periods of dormancy. As the alien population began to recover, rebuilding their cities and reorganizing their military, stories of the Deathworlders' intervention spread rapidly. Across the planet, citizens shared first-hand accounts of the fleet's arrival, the coordinated strikes, and the precision that had turned the tide of battle. Children who had lived in fear now spoke of hope. Soldiers who had felt despair found renewed courage. The presence of the fleet had not only saved lives but had inspired an entire civilization to rise above desperation and reclaim control over their destiny. The SOS had not merely summoned a military force, it had awakened a symbol of hope, discipline, and resilience. Back aboard the fleet, commanders and crew reflected on the lessons learned. Every decision had consequences, and the ability to adapt quickly and strategically had been the key to success. The fleet's systems, while impressive in technological sophistication, had only been effective because of the people operating them. Training, preparation, and coordination had transformed raw power into decisive action. The Deathworlders' legacy was as much about the minds, skills, and discipline of their people as it was about their unmatched technological prowess. They had come as rescuers, strategists, and enforcers of order, and in doing so, they had reinforced the identity of their civilization as a force capable of extraordinary feats when duty called. Upon returning to their homeworld, the fleet descended silently into the hidden bays and shipyards where it had once been dormant. Engines powered down, systems entered standby mode, and crews began the careful process of restoring the ships to their dormant state. There were no parades, no grand ceremonies, only quiet satisfaction and mutual respect among the crew. They had completed the mission not for glory, but because it was their duty, because their civilization required discipline, and because lives had depended on their precise and decisive actions. The SOS had awakened a fleet, but it had also reminded the Deathworlders of their identity, their capabilities, and the responsibility that came with great power. In the days following the return, the commanders reviewed every detail of the operation. Reports were compiled, lessons were documented, and strategies for future engagements were refined. Even though the immediate danger had passed, the understanding that the galaxy remained unpredictable and dangerous prompted preparation for potential future crises. The Deathworlders were aware that peace was often temporary, that threats could arise anywhere, and that their readiness had to remain constant. The SOS had been a wake-up call, not just for the alien species, but for the Deathworlders themselves, reminding them that vigilance, training, and strategic foresight were essential for survival and dominance. The aliens, though far from the Deathworlders' homeworld, maintained communication and expressed their enduring gratitude. Knowledge, resources, and technology were shared cautiously, as both species recognized the value of cooperation tempered by prudence. The impact of the fleet's intervention extended beyond the immediate battle. It had established a foundation for interstellar respect and cautious collaboration. The SOS had accomplished its purpose in multiple dimensions. It had ensured survival, tested readiness, and demonstrated the extraordinary capabilities of a civilization that had long been both feared and respected. In the quiet hours, away from the sensors and screens, the crews reflected on the human or Deathworlder experience. They had faced an unknown enemy, navigated the complexities of alien coordination, and executed strategies that required extraordinary skill and judgment. Courage, discipline, and intelligence had proven more valuable than brute force alone. The SOS had awakened not just the fleet, but the very essence of what made the Deathworlders a legendary civilization: the ability to act decisively, think strategically, and maintain unwavering focus even under the most challenging conditions. Ultimately, the mission concluded without fanfare. The fleet returned to dormancy, the ships silent and hidden, engines cooled, and weapons stored. The SOS had been answered, the alien civilization saved, and the Deathworlders had proven, once more, that their power and discipline were unmatched. While the galaxy at large remained unaware of the full scale of their intervention, the fleet and its crews carried the story in quiet pride. They had acted not for recognition, not for reward, but for duty, honor, and the preservation of life. The SOS had awakened the fleet, but it had also reaffirmed the enduring legacy of a people capable of extraordinary feats, whose vigilance, strategy, and strength would shape the fate of worlds for generations to come.